I've been reading stories, myths, especially creation myths as far as I can remember. And I found they have this intrinsical value and things they can teach us. So in this video, I want to teach you how you can understand and read types of stories like Genesis in order to help you be a better creator. My name is Ethan. I am an artist. I've been doing art since 2012 approximately. I have a bachelor's in animation and digital art, and I also have a master's degree in art and science. I've had my art in several international exhibitions in countries such as Austria, Spain, Russia, and Mexico. We're going to divide this video in several verses from Genesis, and we are going to compare them to the process that we have when we create an artwork. So let's start with the first one. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. So, in this verse, we can start to see how we have this relationship of two polarities. We have the heavens and the earth, which this can mean basically the material world and the creator. Heavens would be, for example, the imagination, the idea, the logos, and earth would be everything we use to create the artwork. In this case, could be paints, pencils, 3D software, etc. If we focus on 3D software, for example, we could use Blender, which is a 3D program, which when you open it, that's what you would have. You would have darkness, you would have void. There's nothing created, the same as a piece of paper. There's nothing there yet. And it is your job as the creator to start. And it's very funny because in that exact example of Blender, there's actually a cube and a light that's not really empty, but you could also think about it as a metaphor, how this cube could represent Earth and how this light could represent heaven. So there's different ways of seeing it. So let's go to the second verse and we'll get a little bit deeper into the text. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light, and it was good. And God divided the light from darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. Now, I think the first reaction would be to interpret this as physical light and physical darkness. But I would say that this is not physical, but actually metaphorical. Light in this sense would be the same as, for example, a cartoon. You know, when you see a cartoon and they're talking and somebody has an idea and then you see this light bulb and it just like starts with light. And it's like, oh, I have an idea. This light, I think it is referring to this type of light, the light of the ideas, the light of imagination. So darkness would be in a sense like when you have a creative block, when you can't find anything to create, like you are in the darkness, you are in a room and there's a lot of people in this room, and because there is no light, you can't find anything. We need light in order to understand what things are and where to go there. So I really like this verse because it is the starting point. It is to open your eyes. It is to have something envisioned and for it to be created with light. So we go to the next phrase. And God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called seas. And God saw that it was good. Now, this is very fascinating for me because this is a starting point. This is the place where you begin your journey. This is a moment where you have to create, you have your guiding principle. And if you paint, if you draw, this would be, for example, the piece of paper. You have to start with something. If you are a 3D artist, this would be your blank canvas, and you can start with a cube, you can start with a light. This is what will start your journey. And based on this is how it will affect the rest of your artwork. So for example, this can be an eye. Once you start to create, for example, an eye, there is a set of rules of how the rest of the portrait of the face should be. You could also, for example, be very cubist and just paint eyes different sizes and different colors and just anatomically non-correct. But if you want to create a realistic portrait, once you create the eye, once you make this eye the starting point, you need to understand that the other eye has to live under the rules of that starting point. This is very important because you could also interpret it as a draft, as a sketch. You put the guidelines, you put the rules, and you use those rules to base the entire painting or the entire work of art. And it is very important because imagine if God suddenly got this part wrong, then all the rest of the text would fall apart, because it is kind of like a pyramid, you know, like the columns need to stand the structure on the top. So I really like this. So you can consider this to be, for example, a building or a temple. The columns need to be strong, need to be firm. If not, then the whole temple will fall. So this starting place, this draft, this sketch needs to be good. And this is where we connect the second part of the verse, which said, and God saw that it was good. Now, in this moment, we would be the creators. So we have to see this sketch, this draft, and understand that it's what we want. It is good, and we can continue building on top of it the artwork or the piece we want to make. The next verse says, and God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. Now, I think that most of the people think that this could be just the light of the sun and the light of the moon to be at night. But I would like to see it more as shadow and light, and how this affects a lot our artwork. Unless you're doing something very flat, like without any shadows, then this is crucial. With light and darkness, you can be able to understand the contour of a figure, the volume, and it also has a very strong emotional connection to humans. How we are used to live in a place with light. We are light creatures, and owls are night creatures. How we gather information based on light and shadow. How we can understand it just by seeing anything you have around you. You can, for example, see this phone or computer which you're watching in this video. Like the way you see it, you are actively interpreting the shadows and the lights of how it hits the object. And with that, you understand its dimensions. You understand how maybe thick it is, how far away it is from you. And these tricks are used a lot in cinema, for example. These tricks also can affect you a lot emotionally. So, for example, we are used to having the light always on top. The natural way of seeing a person, it's always with light above you. And it's always yellow light, right? Because of the sun. But there is other ways you can see it. For example, if you go to a campfire and somebody suddenly starts to tell you a horror story, they will put the lamp underneath their face, and then suddenly their expression seems to change. Even though they have the same shape, you perceive it differently because of the way this light is coming from and the shadows it forms. It forms shadows that are not very common, and this sets you on ease, and that's what gives this horror story a little bit of extra flavor. And you can also play that with artworks. You have a black canvas, you are the creator of your artwork. You can choose where to put the light, how many lights, what colors. Maybe you can use blue light, which make you feel a little bit, maybe it will feel the art to be a bit colder. You can use a little more yellowish orange light, which will make it seem a little bit more comfier. So light and dark forms a very important part in our artworks. And with it we can, I wouldn't say manipulate, but we can influence and share the emotions of our artwork with the viewer. Now, we've summarized several verses of Genesis, and we've gotten to the point where we got to go to the end of it, which is the creation of man. And if we really look at it, Genesis starts with the poles, which is heaven and earth, and then little by little starts going in incremental steps to the center, which is the human. So it creates the creatures of the sea, then will create the creatures of the sky, and it will all end up in the human. Now, what is the human? And this is my favorite part. It's very fascinating because for me, the human in Genesis is the bridge, the connection between these two worlds, between heaven and earth. And that, for an artwork, is the emotion and the soul that will live inside of it. So humans in Genesis, they are made in the image of God. How would we see this in art? We would say, like, for example, the so-called soul of an artwork is made in the image of the artist. One cannot express something if you cannot somehow live it inside of you. So when you see a painting or an artwork that is very dreadful and full of despair, you think like, wow, how did the artist feel this? Like, it's very strong, and that's the point of the artwork, right? For it to show and to express this deep feelings of the artist through the artwork to you, to the spectator, or maybe the opposite, maybe to not express anything at all, which is a lot of modern art. And this is crucial because every time you let your artwork go into the world, it's a reflection of you. You just like let go and make it go free into the world. It is what makes the artwork yours, and it is what makes it and gives it a soul. And it is something that I try to personally use a lot, because I strive for people to be able to see beauty, to see meaning, to understand stories, and to see something they could really think about in art. And I really hope that you and your works go to the world and just make people feel things, make people have meaning and think about their lives. Conclusions. So, in the first one we talked about heaven and earth, how this relate to the material and the divine world, the imagination and the person. We also talked about the canvas and the empty slate, how everything has to start with this empty slate. And we start basically, every artist starts with nothing each time we start creating an artwork. The second verse, we talk about this metaphorical light, the light of imagination, the light of ideas, the light of what we want to do, what ideas we have, and what we want to create. It is a sense I would think a verse of inspiration. Now, the third verse, we would relate it to a starting point, how we need to set up the guidelines, the rules of where to start, and how we would continue these rules in order to create our artwork, and how it is very important to get these guidelines and this draft, this sketch correctly in order to have a great final artistic work. The next verse talks about darkness and light, day and night, and how the connection with these two lights affect our work, how it could be, for example, volume, perception, etc., and how we could use these two elements in order to affect the emotions of the artistic work. And the last verse for me is the most important, the creation of the human. And the creation of the human for me is this point where heaven meets earth, this bridge in between two worlds, this soul that will live in your artwork, how you will live in your artwork and you will be kind of expressed to everybody, how a powerful idea, a powerful emotion, a meaningful thought can be transferred through art, and it's what at the end of the day makes what would be called the soul of the artwork. And if you have other ideas or other stories that might have inspired you, or you think it would be interesting to read for an artist, you can just write it down in the comments. You can send me, I will link my Instagram, so if you made any artwork maybe inspired by Genesis or by any other story, you can just tag me and I will be so happy to see it. And I hope to see you all in the next video.